So I wanted to do a quick video about GCS and how to do a GCS. And remember that GCS it does have some controversy with it, but that is the tool that we have to assess mental status. It's a lot more detailed than the ABPU. Remember that the ABPU is any response. GCS is going to look at 3 responses based on different criteria. We remember this from EMT class. We remember that there's the 3 components that we're going to assess is eye-opening, verbal, and motor. So eye-opening, and this is unlike ABPU, we're going to get any eye-opening response. ABPU again is any response. GCS for eyes is just eye-opening. So we give some, are they open spontaneously? They keep them open, that sort of thing. They get 4 points. If you have to get them to open their eyes with the verbal command, hey, open your eyes, and keep them open, any type of verbal response with eye opening, that's going to be 3. If they open their eyes to pain, so with the trapezius pinch, that's 2 points, and if there's no eye opening at all, that's 1 point. With verbal response, and this can be with you talking to them or with pain, so any verbal response that you get from this patient, and remember we want to grade the best one. So if they're talking to us and they're oriented, that's 5 points. If they're a bit confused, but they're able to answer questions, maybe they don't quite know where they are, maybe they're just not quite with it, maybe they're saying appropriate words, but they're just not appropriate for they're not the right answer, like what year is it, and they say 1999. Well, that's an appropriate response, but they're obviously confused. That would be 4 points. For 3 points, that would be when you ask them what year it is and they give you an inappropriate response, something that they're real words but they don't fit the scenario or the question. What year is it? Texas. That Texas is a real word, but that is not an appropriate response to that question. So confused but appropriate words, 4 points. Inappropriate words, 3 points. And then 2 is kind of the catch-off, or any type of sounds, grunts, moans. You ask them a question and they kind of babble. Anything that you can't really discern a sound, so you can give it a 3, you would give it a 2. And then no verbal response at all would be 1 point. Now motor response, that's going to be the hardest one for us. Again, eye opening and verbal responses comes pretty easy. We don't really have to do a whole lot other than maybe give them some pain. Other than that, that's why I think we do those really well. With motor response, you actually have to go through a series of steps and assess what is their motor response. And I don't think we do this very well, and that's because we just don't know. So hopefully you guys know that they obey command, they get 6 points. Show me 2 fingers, they flip you the bird, with both hands, they're showing you 2 fingers and they get 6 points. Go sit over on the stretcher, they sit on the stretcher. Can you sign this form? They sign the form. Can I take your blood pressure? And they hand you your arm. That's obeying command. 6 points. Excuse me. If they don't obey command, if they can't follow your command, anything, any type of, wiggle my feet, anything like that, if they can't do that, then you have to give them pain. And you have to give them pain in a very specific way. And that is squeezing the trapezius with increasing pressure for up to 10 seconds. If they make if by the end of the 10 seconds you're really squeezing on that muscle and they make no response, that's a 1. But within that 10 seconds, as you're squeezing, if they give you a response, we're going to see what that response is. And that would be your 5 to 2 range. So if they have a purposeful movement to the painful stimulus, so technically their hand would have to actually cross midline for this localized. A lot of charts will put localized to pain in this 5-point bracket. And what that means is you pinch the trapezius and their hand comes up and passes midline, and that would be 5 points. That's localizing the pain. Any other purposeful movement, they raise their hand but they don't cross midline, they pull their shoulder away from you, whatever, that would be 4. So any other purposeful movement that is not crossing midline gets a 4. 3 and 2 are motor responses that are abnormal. So abnormal flexion, you squeeze their trapezius and they pull their arms, they flex their arms in, which is that decorticate position. That's a 3. Or if they extend their arms out, their feet, their hands, their fingers, they spread out their fingers, anything like that is a 2 points. And then, of course, after 10 seconds of increasing pressure on that trapezius, they make no motor response whatsoever. That's a 1. So the important point here is that you actually have to do the GCS. You can't just look at the patient and say, oh, they're a 3. So I'll tell you a story about a patient that was driving down the road, and they were the patient was I think smoking pot. Whatever the situation was, his car actually caught on fire, and he was a little distracted. Obviously, that's understandable, and he wrecked. Well, the car caught on fire, and the person who saw this happen said he was driving down the road and he could see flames coming from the vehicle. He actually ran down to the road to the crash and pulled him out of the car. So he was actually not burned at all, but he did have a very large hematoma on his temple, and he had I'll tell you what the crew told me. So when we got there, the crew, was like, "What's his GCS?" And the crew said 3. And the reason they said 3 is because, he made no attempt to open his eyes, none whatsoever. He made no sounds whatsoever. He didn't grunt. He didn't moan. He didn't make a single sound. So they said his GCS was 3. So 1, 1, and 1, a GCS of 3. And so we'll go through the assessment a little bit. He did have a depressed skull fracture. We didn't know this at the time, other than he did have a very large hematoma on his left temple area. I know this is right, but it was on the left. His eyes, he didn't open his eyes, but I opened his eyes and looked at his pupils, and I noticed he was gazing. He wasn't gazing to the right in this picture. He was actually gazing to the left, which was towards the injury. And later we found out he did actually have an epidural hematoma, so a big head bleed right here, and his eyes were looking over in that direction. So it all maps out. But what I noticed is that we had him backboarded, C-collared. We had him on some oxygen. Put a nasal airway in, which he definitely reacted to. There's my first clue that he did not have a GCS of 3. Tell you, if your patient reacts when you stick a nasal airway in, they are not a GCS of 3. You've done it. You've missed a step here. He also fought with us when we put the IV in, and I thought, this doesn't add up. His GCS is not a 3. So what I did was just like the paramedic over here with the gear on, I grabbed his hand. I said, "Hey, squeeze my hand," and he squeezed my hand. I said, "That is pretty odd." So I said, "Hey, give me a thumbs up." He gave me a thumbs up. So looking at that, I did a reassessment of his GCS. So his eyes were not open to pain, nothing. In fact, I went back and squeezed his trapezius, and all he did was got really upset with me. He made no grunt, no moan, no response, no effort to talk or anything like that. So he was on par for a 3, but I said, "Give me 2 thumbs up," and he gave me 2 thumbs up. So his GCS was actually an 8 instead of a 3. So the point here is that you actually have to do a GCS. Do a GCS, and it's not so much if you're deciding between a 5 and a 4, and you give them, you're quite not sure, and maybe you give him a 4, or he's really a 4 and you give him a 5. Well, that's the difference of plus or minus 1 point. But this, when they said a GCS of 3, this is quite a range. There's a 5-point difference. So we may not get perfect. We may not get well, he was definitely an 8. We may have some varying interpretations. Was that decorticate posture, or was that withdrawal? So you may be on the line here, but that's really just a 1-point difference, and that's okay. If it's just better to have a 1-point difference than a 5-point difference. So at least get close. If you are on the fence about one, just really give them 1 point higher, because we really want to give them the best response. The other point to make is make sure you cover any reversible causes before you